Tonight, airlines brace for a slowdown as Canadians cancel trips to the U.S.
The trust is gone. Why would a Canadian want to go to the United States right now?
The tariff backlash already being felt south of the border.
We're about 40% less over last year.
And the calls for a patriotic display for Flag Day. Donald Trump threatens another auto tariff.
We're going to do it on April 2nd.
Car makers scramble for backup plans. How much more a new car could cost you? And the U.S. Vice President scolds European leaders on their home turf.
In Washington, there is a new sheriff in town.
Reaction from inside the stunned room.
From CBC News, this is The National with Erica Johnson.
Thanks for joining us. This time of year, many Canadians are preparing to head south. But tonight, there are signs of a boycott brewing. Tariff threats spurring Canadians to fight back with their wallets. Travel agents say an increasing number of clients are canceling U.S. trips and booking vacations elsewhere. WestJet has already seen a 25% drop in passengers flying to the States, and Air Canada is reducing some flights it makes to popular March break destinations, anticipating a drop. As Magda Gabriel-Salassi shows us, some Canadian travelers are even willing to take a financial hit in the name of patriotism.
We're not going to America. We're not spending our money there. It's Canada first, baby.
On social media, Canadians are loud and proud about boycotting trips to the U.S.
Flights, accommodation.
Michelle Porter is among them. She had a Florida trip for herself and 6 family members all booked. But Donald Trump's tariff threats changed everything.
I just canceled it.
Canceled a 2-week vacation, including flights, accommodations, and Disney World tickets. Thanks to insurance, she got most of her money back, but she lost about $1,300 U.S. and says she has no regrets.
As Canadians, that we need to stick together and as unity, and I raise my children to feel the same, be proud Canadian.
For Canadians, the U.S. has long been a popular destination. According to the U.S. Travel Association, visitors from Canada topped the list last year with more than 20 million visits. It warns that just a 10% dip in these trips could mean a loss of $2.1 billion. WestJet has already seen a 25% drop for U.S. travel since Donald Trump's tariff threat. Come March, Air Canada will reduce its capacity for some flights south of the border. Travel agencies are adjusting too.
We've looked at our numbers and we're about 40% less over last year, 40% less bookings to the U.S. for leisure travel.
He says customers are also questioning flying with U.S. airlines at all. That's true of this Canadian couple now selling their property in California.
When we go down there to finalize the sale, we'll be flying out of Toronto on a Canadian airline. It's not necessarily cheaper for us, but I'm intentionally avoiding anything I can that's going to put money in the pockets of that system, I guess.
And even if the tariffs never materialize,
I will not go to the United States while Donald Trump is in power.
And Erica, it is not just Michelle Porter. A survey released this week found nearly half of Canadian travelers were less likely to visit the U.S.
Okay. Of course, Magda, this is part of a broader movement among Canadians.
Yeah, from choosing Canadian groceries to pouring California wine down the drain to booing the American national anthem. Since Trump announced that 25% tariff, Canadians are looking for ways to voice their displeasure with the U.S. administration. And tomorrow, we may see another display of patriotism with former prime ministers and politicians encouraging Canadians to fly a Canadian flag.
All right. Thanks for this, Magda. Magda Gabriel-Salassi in Toronto. And it's not just travel and tourism bracing for backlash. Canada's auto industry is also on alert with punishing tariffs looming. Nisha Patel now with what they could mean for automakers and buyers.
Buying a car is a big financial decision.
Because they're already really expensive.
And at the Canadian Auto Show in Toronto, tariffs are making that decision more difficult.
My budget will change if tariffs are a significant difference.
It is frustrating. Yeah, particularly if we had a free trade agreement.
In addition to a possible 25% tariff on all Canadian imports, Donald Trump is threatening another 25% on steel and aluminum. If they go ahead, the costs would be passed on.
It is a tax. It is borne by the consumer. It's borne by businesses. You'd see a new vehicle price go up by as much as $6,000.
With the auto industry's supply chain so deeply interconnected, counter tariffs from Canada could quickly lead to factory shutdowns.
If you go down that path into a tit-for-tat tariff situation, the ability for Canada to maintain that for an extended period of time is very difficult.
North American automakers like Ford and GM say they're making contingency plans. But it's tough to plan when the U.S. president keeps shifting gears. Now Trump is threatening yet another auto tariff, but gave few details.
Maybe around April 2nd. We're going to do it on April 2nd.
And earlier this week, more threats in an interview with Fox News.
If we don't make a deal with Canada, we're going to put a big tariff on cars, could be a 50 or 100%, because we don't want their cars. We want to make the cars in Detroit.
Tariffs are a key part of Trump's economic plan. They can raise revenue to pay for his promised tax cuts. But experts say that could come at a cost for U.S. companies.
We saw during the last round of tariffs from the first Trump administration that the net losses to industry far exceeded any of the gains.
Car buyers here are just trying to make sense of it all.
Hopefully something gets worked out where that's not an issue.
One positive is that new vehicle inventories are returning to normal. So there's a supply of cars already in Canada that may not face price pressures from tariffs. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
The U.S. Justice Department has moved to drop a high-profile bribery and corruption case against New York Mayor Eric Adams. And as Chris Reyes explains, it comes after 7 federal prosecutors resigned in protest, some accusing the Trump administration of trading leniency for political favors.
It's an unlikely pair. New York City's Democratic mayor side by side President Trump's border czar.
We need to get dangerous people off our street. And now I have someone that understands that narrative, and we are fighting together to get it done.
It's a partnership that's being called into question now that the Department of Justice has formally asked a judge to dismiss a corruption case against Eric Adams. Last September, Adams was indicted on bribery-related charges.
I absolutely never traded my power as an elected official for any personal benefit.
The move to end the prosecution came after a dramatic showdown between the Trump administration and prosecutors that saw at least 7 of them resign in protest. It began earlier this week when Emile Beauvais, the acting deputy attorney general and former Trump attorney, directed prosecutors to drop the case, calling the charges politically motivated and saying it prevented the mayor from devoting full attention to New York's illegal immigration problem, a Trump political priority.
It's pretty close to corrupt, and not in the sense that money's changing hands, but that the government, the federal government, is proposing to either bring in a criminal case or not bring a case, depending on whether or not a local public official goes along with federal policies.
The memo prompted the mass resignation of prosecutors, among them Republicans who wrote scathing letters accusing the Department of Justice of soliciting favors from Adams on behalf of the U.S. president. It's a breathtaking and dangerous precedent to reward Adams' opportunistic and shifting commitments on immigration and other policy matters with dismissal of a criminal indictment, said Danielle Sassoon. And from Hagen-Scotton, the lead prosecutor, this: I expect you will eventually find someone who is enough of a fool or enough of a coward to file your motion, but it was never going to be me. Adams denied his attorney would ever propose such a trade-off.
Imagine him going inside saying that the only way Mayor Adams is going to assist in immigration, which I was calling for since 2022, right, is if you drop the charges. That's quid pro quo. That's a crime.
It's one of those things, if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, if it looks like a deal and it quacks like a deal, it sure feels like one, whether or not there is a formal deal.
You know what makes this request so dramatic and really with little precedent is that Beauvais made it clear that this decision was made without even assessing the strength of the case. Also notable is that the memo leaves room to revive the case, and that means these charges remain hanging over the mayor's head, really at the behest of the Trump administration.
And Chris, in theory, the case isn't dismissed, at least not yet.
That's right. Only the judge can really dismiss this case, Erica. And while there's little he can do to keep it alive, he can call Beauvais or other Trump Justice Department officials before the court to explain themselves.
All right. Thanks for this, Chris. At a security conference in Munich, European officials awaited details on Washington's plan to end Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But Chris Brown shows us U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance addressed the crowd with a different concern, what he called the enemy within.
Well, good afternoon, everybody.
Visiting the Munich Security Conference, J.D. Vance's hosts wanted the U.S. Vice President to underscore American determination to pressure Vladimir Putin to end his war in Ukraine. Instead, Vance lectured them.
The threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within.
A stunned room listened as Vance berated his hosts, Germany, for allegedly silencing voices on the far right ahead of a key election. Germany's defense minister was livid. He compared conditions in parts of Europe with those in authoritarian regimes, said Boris Pistorius. Ladies and gentlemen, that is unacceptable.
Das ist nicht akzeptabel.
Vance's lecture capped a week of dramatic and conflicting pronouncements from Donald Trump and his top officials on European security. Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky affirmed he won't let Trump and Putin talk over his head.
I will meet with Russians, with only one Russian guy, with Putin, only after we will have common plan with Trump, Europe, and we will sit with Putin and stop the war.
While not in Munich, Vladimir Putin may still have sent a message about his willingness to compromise. Overnight, Ukraine says a Russian drone smashed into one of the most dangerous places in Europe, the dome covering the sealed Chernobyl nuclear plant, causing damage but no radiation leak. Senior Trump officials have been pounding home the message that the U.S. now has higher security concerns than Europe, leaving Ukrainians to worry that Trump may want a fast peace deal and not necessarily one that's good for them. Vance's scolding won't help ease those concerns. Chris Brown, CBC News, London.
New details tonight on what may have caused last month's deadly mid-air collision in Washington. Investigators now say the helicopter crew that slammed into a passenger plane may not have heard a key instruction from air traffic control.
The portion of the transmission that stated, "pass behind the," may not have been received by the Black Hawk crew.
Air traffic control told the chopper to pass behind the plane, but the crew likely missed it. It was also flying higher than expected, possibly due to faulty data. 67 people were killed, making it the deadliest U.S. aviation disaster in decades. Conservative MPs met in Ottawa today for the first time since December, but they returned to a much different political landscape. As Olivia Stefanovich reports, between sliding poll numbers and Donald Trump, Conservatives are looking for new ways to appeal to voters.
What do you think of how the government is handling the Donald Trump tariff issue?
Conservatives weren't revealing much heading into their caucus meeting when it came to the U.S. president.
How would a conservative government handle things differently?
But there was one person they did want to talk about.
We've been consistently concerned about Carbon Tax Carney's failure to provide any transparency to Canadians.
I just want to address Mark Carney's comments where he was downplaying the opioid crisis.
Mark Carney is considered the frontrunner in the Liberal leadership race, and the Conservatives are responding with ads like these.
Trump wants our jobs.
We're going to take other countries' jobs.
And Mark Carney is just the man to help him.
While the Liberals fight back, trying to frame the Conservative leader as Trump of the North.
I plan to cut foreign aid more.
A foreign aid freeze, isn't that it?
There's no doubt in my mind that Conservatives and Mr. Poilievre have a Trump problem, and that is because a sizable portion of Conservative supporters, like Mr. Trump, agree with a lot of his policies.
This pollster says the Conservatives still have a considerable lead, but it's narrowing.
Minds have opened up post Trudeau quitting and now Trump kind of being in people's focus. that has given the Liberals, I think, a new opportunity to persuade Canadians that they deserve another shot in office.
Thank you all so much for the incredible work you're doing. I know
The outgoing prime minister is trying to stand up to Trump.
we're standing up strong, we're pushing back.
And with a new show of patriotism, a giant Canadian flag skated down the Rideau Canal for the 60th anniversary of the Maple Leaf, right in front of the convention center, where the Conservatives plan to hold a rally Saturday to promote national pride. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Ottawa.
The federal tax holiday is coming to an end. Saturday is your last chance to save on items like wine, groceries, and diapers. The measure was meant to ease the cost of living and boost business. But as Anis Hadari explains, it may not have been worth the effort.
There are mixed reviews out there about just how much a GST cut changed anyone's shopping habits.
No, not really. It's not like, oh, now I can go for a vacation.
If I did added up the numbers, it would show up, but really, in terms of behavior or buying, it had no bearing.
The biggest difference has definitely been at restaurants. I'm more encouraged to go out to restaurants.
Restaurants like this one agree.
I think it was a much needed relief when they saw their bill. They were very excited to see that tax break reflect on their bill.
Industry leaders want the cut to stay to help a sector they say is struggling.
This is actually working and stimulating the economy and providing Canadians with the relief that they needed to be able to treat themselves on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis.
But the reviews aren't as hot in other sectors. One of Canada's largest payment processors said they saw fewer card transactions in the first month of the GST cut compared to the year before, with Moneris suggesting the tax break didn't boost sales, something predicted by many economists.
You called this a nightmare several months ago. Has the dream come true?
Main government managed to use several $1 billion in one of the worst ways I could imagine, so I suppose so.
The GST cut was projected to cost $1.6 billion.
We knew that this was going to be an expensive policy with the general idea that it would make people feel like life was more affordable. I think that at a fundamental level, that hasn't shifted.
You get to check.
On top of that, retailers like this one agree this tax break didn't seem to drive spending.
I think it was such a non-starter. I think we didn't feel that it was fantastic or like terrible. It just didn't really do anything.
So by Sunday, say goodbye to the tax cut that just didn't cut it for everyone. Anis Hadari, CBC News, Calgary.
A slow-moving winter storm that buried Ontario and Quebec earlier this week is making a mess of Atlantic Canada. Winter storm warnings are in effect for most of the east coast, where as much as 55 centimeters of snow is forecast for parts of Newfoundland and Labrador. In central Canada, the cleanup continues in advance of another storm expected to bring up to 25 centimeters of snow beginning Saturday morning. Fear of deep water sabotage is driving NATO to ramp up patrols in the Baltic Sea.
Our operational area covers this part of the Finnish Gulf.
Briar Stewart hits the open water with a crew looking for threats. Plus, as Canadians look to buy local, some are trying to make shopping trips a little easier.
We thought we had to find a way to centralize all this information.
The new apps aimed at helping you buy Canadian. And later, on the eve of Flag Day, a love letter to the Maple Leaf.
We will all celebrate your gift to us, from coast to blessed coast.
A veteran's moving and timely tribute. We're back in 2. Right now, a lot of Canadians are trying to do whatever they can to support local businesses. Now, a number of new apps are cropping up to make that a little easier. Vanessa Lee shows us how they work.
With the threat of tariffs looming, Canadians are doubling down on buying local.
We see this one is very Canadian.
These Montrealers have created an app to make it easier for shoppers to identify Canadian products.
We saw on social media a lot of different lists of products being shared. They were not always correct, so we thought we had to find a way to centralize all this information.
Buy Beaver is community-driven, relying on users to comment, rate, and share information.
You can scan the barcode, then it will rate the product as either Canadian or not on a scale of 1 to 5. And it will rate it based on where it's made, where the ingredients and the materials are from, and finally, who owns the brand or the company.
Similar apps have launched overnight with a common cause.
And we've got a couple of ratings there. Peanut butter made in Toronto.
The Shop Canadian app already has more than 100,000 downloads.
This was about a week ago, and we were in our kitchen, and I was trying to figure out if what I was eating was Canadian. And I had to jump through several hoops to try and figure out what I was eating. And eventually I came up with the idea.
It also leans on crowdsourcing. Half of the 100,000 products in its database have been reviewed.
But it's cool to see that we're making a difference. I mean, in our wildest dreams, we were hoping to keep a couple $100s in Canada. With the traction we've gained and the people using our app, we're able to do a little bit more.
The Buy Canadian sentiment is having an impact on bottom lines. Family-owned Chapman's Ice Cream says it has seen a bump in sales.
I would say, yeah, maybe 10%. So yeah, very significant, especially for January, which is typically the lowest sales month of the year.
The creators of the apps know they're not perfect and say they're working around the clock to ensure the information is accurate, a labor of love for their country. Vanessa Lee, CBC News, Montreal.
In a Muslim American community in the U.S., anger at Democrats over the war in Gaza helped propel Donald Trump to the White House.
Our vote was to end the killing of hundreds, possibly thousands of people per day.
Chris Reyes returns to Dearborn, Michigan to see how voters are feeling now. And in Gaza, the war has reduced schools and universities to rubble.
It is one of the most sad days in my life.
The professor trying to salvage what's left in the ruins. Plus, Donald Trump has frozen the country's largest aid organization, and the move could have big implications. Could it make the world less stable? The National breaks down the story shaping our world next. NATO is stepping up patrols in the Baltic Sea after recent incidents of suspected Russian sabotage. Our Briar Stewart went aboard an Estonian ship monitoring for any threats on critical undersea infrastructure.
On the roiling Baltic Sea, Estonia has stepped up patrols, monitoring ships passing through this busy corridor.
Our operational area covers this part of the Finnish Gulf.
The Navy is looking for anything that might seem out of place or is suspicious.
Not adhering to the sea lines of communications, also changing the speed, not having their anchors where they should be.
Estonia and others are on alert. NATO has even dispatched extra frigates and naval drones because of what's been happening below the surface and the possibility that it could be sabotage. Over a 5-week period last year, there were 3 separate incidents of undersea cables being damaged in the area. On December 25th, the power line connecting Estonia and Finland was severed, along with 4 internet cables. Experts say that every year there are between 150 and 200 cases of cables being damaged. The damage can happen because of anchors, commercial fishing, or even underwater landslides. But in these recent cases, some suspected Russia and its shadow fleet of ships which skirt international sanctions of playing a role. After the cables were severed in December, Finland seized a tanker carrying Russian oil. This anchor was later found, which officials said had been dragged 100 kilometers. Estonia's Navy told CBC News that it's now seeing more older tankers with inexperienced crews. But even still, officials have a hard time accepting that the anchor drag was accidental.
I don't believe that you cannot notice the anchor dragging for such a long distances.
Russia called the accusations that it sabotaged the cables ridiculous, but investigations are ongoing. Estonia's Navy says it hasn't seen any incidents since it launched more patrols and vows to keep monitoring the sea. Briar Stewart, CBC News, near the Gulf of Finland.
Now it's time to dig deeper into the stories shaping our world. As the Israel-Hamas ceasefire hangs in the balance, Gazans return to the places they lived and worked.
Oh my God.
Tonight, a professor takes a CBC freelancer to the ruins of his university.
It is really a crime. I am very, very, very sad.
What he found amid the rubble of the classrooms. But first, Arab American voters in Michigan helped propel Trump to the White House. Then Trump announced his Gaza plan.
Were you hurt by it? Did you take it personally? 100%, of course. And I'm going to fight that if that's the plan.
So, do they regret their choice? CBC's Chris Reyes returned to Dearborn, Michigan to find out.
Inshallah, Harris is going to lose because of us.
This was Dearborn, Michigan, just weeks before the presidential election. Arab American voters were intent on punishing the Biden administration over the war in Gaza.
There needs to be an accountability for the lives lost.
They wanted one thing from their vote.
Who's going to stop the bombing of my people?
A ceasefire came into effect as President Trump took office. And then
it's right now a demolition site.
He dropped his plans for the future of Gaza.
The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too.
We're back in Dearborn. We were here last year for about a week talking to voters just before the election. This place holds the distinction of being the first Arab majority city in the U.S. Huge population here. And Trump really made a big play for that community, and it worked. He won here over Kamala Harris by more than 42% of the vote. We wanted to come back to talk to the same people that we interviewed to find out what they think of Trump now.
Were you hurt by it? Did you take it personally? 100%, of course. Of course, yeah. I don't accept that. And I'm going to fight that if that's the plan.
Samra Lukman voted for Trump, convinced he was the best option to stop the death and destruction in Gaza.
Even if theoretically Trump was to incentivize Palestinians to leave Gaza, he did not say he would do it with violence. He did not say he was going to kill every child that remained on that land, which is what the Democrats were allowing to happen. I think.
But now she's nervous after Trump says he might cancel the ceasefire if Israeli hostages don't come home.
All bets are off and let hell break out.
We didn't stop a genocide only to have it continue under a different administration. That's not what the goal was.
A new dilemma for this Dearborn community, rocked so deeply by the war. At this local restaurant, owner Sam Hammoud, who voted for a third-party candidate, is hearing a lot of blame.
They held Dearborn Heights responsible for what Trump is doing.
What's your answer to those people who say, look what you did?
Where was your voice when all this was going on? How come you guys didn't come out, say, hey, what's going on in the Middle East needs to stop?
Our vote was to end the killing of hundreds, possibly thousands of people per day. And we achieved that. We have a ceasefire under Trump. And I don't regret that.
Hello, assalamu alaikum. You guys are registered voters? Do go vote.
When we first met local activist Farah Khan, she was campaigning against Kamala Harris and voted for Jill Stein.
Nice to see you again. Oh, good to see you.
Now, she's planning her next move.
We are going to get together and organize against Trump as well, as just as powerful as we did for the Biden-Harris administration.
Do you regret campaigning for a third-party candidate that likely helped with Trump's victory?
No, not one bit. What actually just happened in the past elections, it should be a learning curve for the politicians as well. You know, they should know that you can no longer fool the people by with your empty rhetoric, with your false promises.
Over and over again, the voters we talked to told us it was never about Trump.
We are not married to the Republican Party. We're not married to the Democratic Party. As a voting bloc, American Muslims and Arabs are going to be voting with Gaza in mind.
We are not going anywhere. We are here.
You know, what was made really clear to us in the time that we spent in Dearborn is that Arab American voters are watching this unpredictable president closely. And if he moves ahead with any of his Gaza plans, they're ready to use their mobilizing power against him. And as you heard in the piece, they're not loyal to Trump, only to the Palestinian cause.
Okay, Chris, has the Trump administration made any effort to reach out to the Arab American community following his comments?
You know, Erica, if they have, it hasn't been done in a public way, certainly not in the way that Trump courted their vote during the election when he visited Dearborn and there were plenty of photo ops. Now, Samra, the one voter that we talked to who met with Trump last year, says that his team hasn't reached out to her or any of her fellow community members. But remember, with such a strong mandate, Trump doesn't need to court any new votes right now until midterms.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Chris Reyes in New York tonight. Now, in Gaza, many are returning to shattered homes and schools, including a former professor. As Chris Brown tells us, amidst the rubble, he found hope for the next chapter.
Israel's pounding attacks on Gaza didn't just obliterate homes, they erased the cultural institutions at the center of Palestinian society, such as the Al-Azhar University in Gaza City, where 16,000 undergraduates once studied.
I am going now back also to the library, which has completely burned, to see whether I can find some books to rescue them.
Mohammed Hattab, a biochemist with a PhD, taught at Al-Azhar for 30 years. Now almost 80 and homeless. He took our videographer in Gaza back to the campus.
Oh my God.
Only to find spent Israeli mortar rounds where his science building once stood.
Does they think that we are wild animals, as Netanyahu said? We are not wild animals. They are the wild animals because they destroy everything.
Israeli commanders said they found Hamas tunnels under the campus, explaining why so much was destroyed. In selfies, some Israeli soldiers mocked the destruction. Others shot video of them using the university as their own military base.
Look here.
Inside the only structure standing, Hattab found Hebrew graffiti about Israeli sports teams.
My God, my God. What is this here?
Mixed in with the debris was a young woman's report card.
Philosophy, 88. Excellent, excellent marks. They have simply thrown it, the different kinds of books.
In another room, someone else had already started stacking the books that could be salvaged.
What kind of mentality for these soldiers who have done this crime? It is really a crime. I am very, very, very sad. It is one of the most sad days in my life. Everything is burning.
Last spring, a UN panel suggested Israel's actions could be a deliberate attempt to inflict what it called scholasticide, the intentional destruction of the education system. Donald Trump has said his day after plan for Gaza involves not having Palestinians living here, effectively expulsion. Hattab says that will never happen.
We, the Palestinian people, are determined to stay alive in our country, and we will never leave it. Never.
Book by book, Hattab says Gaza will be restored.
Coming up, Donald Trump shut down billions in foreign aid, and the impact could be devastating for those counting on it around the globe.
It's catastrophic, it was immediate, and it will affect the lives of millions of people.
We break down the global fallout next. Trump effectively shuttered U.S. foreign aid programs.
The reason USAID is going to cease to exist as it did before is because it should.
The courts are now pushing back, but the move is a clear retreat from soft power diplomacy like foreign aid, and Canada may take a similar course.
I will be bringing our money home with massive cuts
to these wasteful and corrupt foreign aid grants.
And that shift could have major implications for world stability. Kate Higgins is the CEO of Cooperation Canada, representing 100 humanitarian agencies. She's in Ottawa. And in Washington, Noam Unger, who's with the Centre for Strategic and International Studies. Kate, the freeze was so sudden. How has it already played out on the ground?
Well, you're right. It was abrupt and it was sudden, and the impacts are really catastrophic. What we're seeing is that children who do not have access to essential food, we are seeing health clinics shut down immediately. We're seeing women and children without protection. Concretely, what does this look like? We know in Nigeria, there are malnourished children that don't have access to essential food. We know that in South Sudan, doctors needed to stop working with children in need. We know that in Syria, there are clinics that were supporting women escaping violence that have had to close down. We know that there are warehouses with essential medicines, essential food aid that are just spoiling. So it's catastrophic. It was immediate, and it will affect the lives of millions of people.
The fallout has begun. I want to show you a video that we got from Oxfam, one of the agencies you represent, Kate, about a food program in Lebanon.
Right now, we're at Oxfam partner ICO, who are preparing over 760 meals. These meals are going to be distributed to 8 shelters around Tripoli.
In this room is the place where we are preparing, where the team is preparing the food. Here is the kitchen, where the food is being cooked and everything prepared to go out to the packing section to ensure that the meals are equally set and distributed.
So, Kate, what is the impact of losing a program like that?
Well, the impact is that people who are relying on essential services like food, like healthcare, do not have access to those. Communities that are really facing the brunt of desperate humanitarian situations no longer have access to basic services, basic food, basic healthcare. So the impact is devastating for those communities that are so deeply affected.
Noam, beyond these tangible benefits to providing foreign aid, you say the cuts make the world less stable.
Yes, I mean, to Kate's point, the cuts have been very sudden, and there are responsible ways to reform. And what we're seeing so far from this effort is it seems to be a barely veiled attempt to eviscerate foreign aid. And U.S. foreign assistance actually has a lot of geopolitical implications around the world. So, for example, our relationships with the communities and the countries that U.S. foreign assistance serves will be directly affected by the current cessation or lengthy pause in assistance delivery. And that will affect those relationships for a long time to come. But it will also create a gap into which U.S. adversaries would be all too happy to fill. So China, Russia, moving into spaces, turning and pointing towards the U.S. and saying, this is how unreliable the U.S. is as a partner, work with us instead. That will have major implications for U.S. foreign policy. And additionally, much of foreign assistance is actually focused on stemming transnational concerns. Some of that has to do with the spread of disease. We want disease surveillance around the world so that we can catch outbreaks before they spread. And pandemics do not recognize political borders. We're fooling ourselves if we think that they can. And additionally, foreign assistance also is focused on stemming violent conflict that prompts a lot of population displacement, so migration issues, as well as corruption and crime, trafficking in people and drugs. All of this will be affected by the foreign assistance freeze.
Okay, and Kate, this week Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre also said he would slash this country's foreign aid.
I will be bringing our money home with massive cuts to these wasteful and corrupt foreign aid grants.
Is this part of a wider shift in how the West interacts in the world?
Well, we've just heard the really important humanitarian value of foreign aid. as well as the powerful strategic value of foreign aid. Foreign aid makes the world safer. Foreign aid builds markets for countries to grow, but also markets for Canadian businesses to access. Foreign aid makes the world safer and more secure by combating terrorism, for example. So I think there are really important humanitarian reasons to continue foreign aid, but also really important strategic reasons to continue foreign aid. It's the right thing to do, but it is also in countries like Canada's national interest.
And Noam, you also think these cuts could have an impact on the relationships that the U.S. has with allies. The relationship with Canada is already being tested with the potential of tariffs. How do these foreign aid cuts further weaken that?
U.S. Contributions to foreign assistance globally provides often a foundation for international partnerships. And so Canada and other allies often join together in programs or some of the multilateral institutions. But a lot of that has the U.S. contribution at its core. And if it is yanked away in such a dramatic fashion as has happened just recently, then the assistance from many other countries and a lot of programs can founder, not just those of USAID, for example.
All right, well, it's something we will be watching very closely, as I'm sure both of you are as well. Kate Higgins, Noam Unger, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Here's another story we're working on. Canada's Cybersecurity Centre's work is cloaked in secrecy, but now it wants to get out a very public warning about the threats Canadians are facing. Ian sat down with the head of the agency, Rajiv Gupta.
Misinformation is critical. Everyone's got a megaphone now that's able to put out a false narrative. And then you can now justify or substantiate false narratives with synthetic content through AI and other sorts of means like that. So it's a challenge for all countries around the world. And in the space of an election, we know that nation states use information operations as part of their apparatus.
We hear a lot about the Five Eyes and the intelligence sharing between Canada, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, and the United States. Mm-hmm. But these are tumultuous times in the United States, and we've seen it certainly on the trade front. What kind of impact has the new administration had and all the changes had on intelligence gathering?
Yeah, like all Canadians, we're watching the news and seeing what the changes are. But from our perspective, in terms of our interactions, we go back 75, 80 years of history in terms of working with the Five Eyes, working with the U.S. and our other partners. And so far, all good. We're unaffected, and we'll continue that. I'd like to think that cybersecurity is a nonpartisan issue.
You can watch Ian's full interview with Rajiv Gupta this Sunday right here on The National. Next, a Canadian veteran writes a letter to the flag.
The deafening cheers on Parliament Hill that day gave me goosebumps.
His heartfelt tribute in our moment. "60 years ago, on February 15th, the Canadian flag, as we know it today, was raised for the first time on Parliament Hill. And this is retired Major Bruce Stock. The London, Ontario veteran was on duty that day. Now, as the flag turned 60 and Donald Trump challenges Canada's nationhood, Bruce is paying tribute in the form of a letter to the flag. And tonight, his patriotic gesture is our moment.
My dear flag, I know, it's really unusual for someone to write their flag. Not only is it your 60th birthday or diamond anniversary, which everyone agrees is a landmark, but I was there when you were born.
The maple leaf is attached to the halyard.
The deafening cheers on Parliament Hill that day gave me goosebumps. You are now widely accepted as one of the most welcome symbols of democracy anywhere on the planet, and you are fully embraced by those at home and millions of newcomers. Without you, dear flag, Canada wouldn't exist. And during the next few years, come every February the 15th, we will all celebrate your gift to us from coast to blessed coast. Respectfully yours, Bruce Stock. Vimy Branch number 145, London, Ontario.
And that is just an excerpt of Bruce's letter to the flag. Now, the flag may be 60 years old, but National Flag Day is just 29 years old. Jean Chrétien declared National Flag Day back in 1996 to instill a sense of patriotism. And I'm sure tomorrow we're going to see a lot of flags from coast to coast to coast. From all of us at The National, thank you for being with us. You can watch anywhere, anytime on the free CBC News app and subscribe to The National's YouTube channel. I'm Erica Johnson in Vancouver. Take care.